Apple's product release cycle has become more and more packed year by year as they expand out into more product categories. We're most likely just 2 weeks away from Apple's next big product announcement on the 7th of September, but what does Apple have in store for us in the next 12 months? Let's talk about that. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell. We're starting to see new patterns emerge for where Apple is likely to place events throughout their year, and we're set to see even more coming next year. So let's talk about September, October, January, March, June, and back around to September 2023. 6 events to get through, so we'd better get started. September 2022. Let's start off with this September, and because we're pretty close, we have a pretty good idea of what is actually going to be coming, although there are a few question marks. First up, the iPhone 14, 14 Max, 14 Pro, and 14 Pro Max. While the iPhone 14 isn't expected to change too much, with Apple switching out the Mini for a Max at the base level, meaning that you can now get a big screened iPhone without spending the big bucks this year. Inside, the chip is thought to be basically a reused A15 from the iPhone 13 range, and quite possible that Apple will do the same as they've done in the past couple of years on the Apple Watch and just rename it with a new number. Pro iPhones will be getting the next generation of chips, so if they do actually rename the A15 to A16, this could maybe be called the A16 Pro or the A16X perhaps. Of course, Apple might just be honest and just call it the A15 still. Seems unlikely though. The camera is set to get a massive leap with the Pros from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels, allowing 8K movie recording for the first time on an iPhone. But going up just like that resolution is also the price, with the iPhone Pros most likely getting a $100 price hike, while it's unclear if they'll get a storage boost to match. Oh, and of course the Pro iPhones finally dump the notch for the patent pending eye hole, the controversial combination of a pill and a hole cutout on the screen side, as well as potentially an improved selfie camera. And that screen will have the ability to be always on thanks to a refresh rate that can dip down to 1 Hz, dimming your image but keeping the widgets visible, though I personally think when it's in your pocket, Apple will probably use that proximity sensor on the screen to turn it off as well, saving a little bit more battery. Also at the September event, expect the Apple Watch Series 8, just not with the redesign that we all wanted. Instead, expect maybe some new colours and a body temperature sensor being added too, but again with a chip that basically matches up with last year's. Now we could see an update to the NSE and the final demise of the, for some reason still here, Apple Watch Series 3. It also looks like Apple Watch Edition will leave the lineup this year, with Apple Watch Pro taking over with premium titanium builds and a slightly modified design, though I'm not expecting this to be the mythical rugged watch that everyone has been talking about. I'm still pretty sure that that was the Series 7, and so it seems is Apple's marketing team. AirPods Pro are due an update too, although the new features are unclear. Perhaps better support for Find My, probably high-resolution audio over some new standard, but reports of the health features are likely over-exaggerated. Then things get a little bit muddy. Most years we'd expect iPads here, but while it seems that iOS 16 is fully baked and ready to ship, iPadOS 16 is being delayed until October when the next event comes along with macOS Ventura. If we were to get iPads, expect the $330-ish iPad 10th generation to be one of them, along with most likely a 7th generation iPad mini. The base iPad would likely get an A14 and the iPad mini a bump to a 16. There have been mixed rumours about the base iPad getting a new design style, but it was kind of a half-baked design with flat sides and USB-C, but still keeping the home button, which just doesn't make that much sense. But we'll see. It could be that these devices get revealed at the event but don't ship until later in the year like the iPad Air 4th generation did in 2020, or they might ship these with iOS 15 initially, as iPadOS really isn't getting many upgrades for non-M1 iPads. If the iPads are missing, then perhaps we could see the rumoured HomePod updates that we've heard about, although they're more likely to arrive in spring next year. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. October 2022. If you're a regular on my channel, this might well be the one that's more up your street, as we're hitting the max here, and if you're not, feel free to give that subscribe button a little tickle, you cheeky thing. So Mac, we've had the M2 announced this June, so that doesn't need explaining again. Think how Apple approached the M1 iMacs in the spring-loaded event in 2021. The focus was on the new design and the updated product, not on the chip. Here we'll most likely see our Mac Mini, and reports are mixed on whether it actually gets a redesign or not, but honestly it doesn't matter, it's not a massive redesign. Either way, it's still basically an aluminium puck with a Mac inside it. Apple could just anodize them a new colour and we'd be really excited. Imagine that thing in midnight. I'm so in. So, M2 Mac Mini and most likely an M2 Pro version too, which would be a great way to bring a little bit more performance to the desktop. I'd expect M2 pricing to be in line with the previous M1 at $699, just like the 13-inch MacBook Pro, with the M1 Pro option coming in with 512 gigs of storage, 16 gigs of memory as standard, and probably around about $1299. That seems like a realistic price point for that device, given that you'd be paying $200 each for those two upgrades and then a little bit extra for the chip inside. But let me know your thoughts on the pricing in the comments. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about the iMac being skipped until M3, but in what world would that make any sense? So I could see the iMac getting M2 Pro at this event as well, as I doubt that Apple would have put out a new design last year and already backed themselves into a thermal corner. Maybe M2 starts at $1499 and the binned M1 stays at $1299. M2 Pro iMacs then starting at $1999. Can't see Apple releasing the M2 Pro as well without a MacBook Pro to match it, so I think we'll see the M2 Pro and M2 Max updates for the MacBook Pro 14 and 16-inch coming too, with the M1 Pro and M1 Max versions being discontinued this time. But I'd really love to see the M1 Mac Mini stick around with a $100 price cut. I can dream, can't I? Also at this event, we know that iPadOS is being delayed until October, so we could see those base and mini iPads, as mentioned before, but I'm pretty sure that we'll see the M2 iPad Pro, especially as the iPad Air was updated to M1 in spring this year. Beyond M2 inside, there have been rumours about a redesign and possible wireless charging, as well as a new 4-pin style smart connector. I mean, I guess that could be MagSafe of some sort, but do we need 3 different styles of MagSafe right now? Everything's pretty vague on that front though, so I guess watch this space. There's also been talk of a Mac Pro being previewed before launching later in the year too, and again, I'd love to think that, but I'm skeptical. I think that the spring event that we'll come to soon makes a bit more sense. Now, for this Mac Pro, rumours are suggesting a 40-core CPU with 32 of those being performance and 128 GPU cores, although if it's M2 generation, those numbers could go up a little bit. The design is likely to look similar to the current 2019 model, possibly with some changes to the dimensions, and reports have said that the prototypes have included at least one full-size PCI slot, although it's not clear if that's there for hardware testing or something that would be included in the final product. If it is, however, don't expect it to be there for discrete GPUs, but more likely to be for controllers for audio hardware or additional storage. In the past, Apple has announced the Mac Pro around WWDC, with orders opening around December to take advantage of anyone's leftover budget for the year being spent. Crafty. Then, January. Yes, January 2023. Apple doesn't normally hold January events, although one particular Apple reveal does stand out, and that is the original iPhone on January the 9th, 2007. January the 9th falls on a Monday in 2023, so that's not out of the realms of possibility. And January is when Apple is rumoured to be showing off their Reality headset, presumably their play for the metaverse and the software platform that it will run on, Reality OS. So just like with the iPhone, Apple Reality probably won't ship right away, but perhaps between Easter and WWDC in June, allowing developers to get some apps together ahead of the launch. Now, the headset is rumoured to consist of a pair of 8K micro OLED displays, as well as an LCD display for peripheral vision, and will most likely be powered by something along the lines of the M2 chip, working as a standalone device rather than running from an iPhone or a Mac, with a price point of between $2,000 and $3,000, so not cheap. Oh, and if we don't see the Mac Pro in October, it could well be here instead. Spring 2023, probably March. The spring event seems to be becoming more of a regular feature of the Apple calendar right now, having occurred the past 2 years. Three's a pattern, right? The spring 2021 event brought AirTag, Apple TV updates, a purple iPhone 12, M1 iMac, and M1 iPad Pro. Spring 2022 gave us the iPhone SE3, green iPhone 13, iPhone 13 Pros, iPad Air with M1, and the Mac Studio with Studio Display, introducing the M1 Ultra chip. Now, I think we could see a similar lineup to 2022's event, with a new iPhone color, iPad Air with M2, and a Mac Studio with M2 Max and Ultra options. And I also think that the spring event would be a good time to do the HomePod updates, probably some services updates, so maybe Podcast Plus, Maps Plus, and even Apple Card rolling out to more countries. And you might be wondering what Podcast Plus and Maps Plus is. Maybe they're going to roll them out to other platforms and do that ad-supported thing that we've been hearing about. That might work, and if you get the Plus version, you get it without ads. Maybe. There's also been talk of the larger MacBook Air that Apple has under development, potentially coming here too, with a 15-inch display and M2 inside, and unrealistically, for me at least, an M2 Pro chip. Now, I don't see that, and I don't see it coming in spring. I think the larger MacBook Air is more likely to come in spring of 2023 at WWDC and pop an M3 in there. So, we're back around to WWDC, and if my theory is correct, we should be seeing the first of those M3 Macs arriving, and likely the first Apple Silicon chips built on TSMC's 3nm node, as the chipmaker has reported that the first 3nm chip will be delivered to customers around spring of 2023, and those customers are Apple, not us, so they'll go into manufacturing ready for June's conference and delivery. 3nm chips will give huge improvements, around 25% more efficient and 15% more efficient, before Apple does any work on the design of the cores themselves, just for scaling down the transistors. Now, Apple does tend to do a bit of homework as well, so expect big things. Of course, WWDC also brings new software features each year, making the stuff that you have already even better. So really, it's the most important event of the year for the vast majority of Apple users. September 2023. And back to the iPhone event, this time for the launch of the iPhone 15, which will be solid-state hydrogen powered instead of traditional batteries, with periscope cameras for underwater photography. Seriously though, it'll be the usual September: iPhones, watches, maybe some iPads, and the cycle begins again. The big takeaway from this is that I expect that Apple is shifting to an annual update cycle for all of their products as far as possible, maybe with the exception of the Mac Pro. MacBooks Air and Pro in the past have always averaged around 360 days or so between updates, and that was when Intel was in charge, so it was very much just when they could get hold of the chips. So now Apple is in charge of the development, and they're designing the cores for every iPhone generation anyway. Why wouldn't they? Apple could even move to a more modular chipset for some of their chips as well, reducing the issue of binning chips with errors. Let me know what you're the most excited for, and if you have a question for a future show, hashtag iCaveAnswers down in the comments. Thanks to the Patreons, the neural engines to my Ultra chips, because somebody has to bring at least artificial intelligence. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.